By around 3000 BC, the last of the European hunter-gatherers were dwindling both in their numbers and the extent of the territory they lived in. An earlier migration of farmers from modern-day Turkey, whose agricultural practices mostly relied on burning down forests and vegetation to make clearings for cropping and settlement, had destroyed the native Europeans' hunting areas. A new and ongoing invasion by horse-riding pastoralists from modern Ukraine and southern Russia was only making life harder for the few native tribes who still existed. Within a few generations, the last Europeans to live traditional tribal lives were now gone, with their genetic lineage assimilated into the new settlers. The descendants of these settlers today constitute the people of Europe, Australia, and North America.
A global psychosocial transformation is underway. In the burning deep winter cold, our bodies snot around the black flame. Something is coming. The air turns frigid and thin. The fire smolders. The cinders smell acrid. A fleshless white ghost with two bright cold eyes is getting closer through the trees. I can't move. The children are sleeping, frozen under its spell. It hears their hearts beating. I face it now. I feel its eyes holding mine. 10,000 generations have led to this. 10 billion souls are melted into one. The last links are being cut. Find the ones you love and cling to them. We enter this new world naked.
First chapter. Invisible architecture and the society of strangers.
Social architecture is the design of physical spaces as a way of shaping the social relations that happen inside them. Put any group of people in a context where it's expected that they'll socialize, and there's a pretty predictable structure that people organically arrange themselves into. There'll be a central point, a communal area where people can come and go and anyone can join in the conversation, where things are kept light and general enough to avoid alienating anyone, and it's a kind of neutral zone for everyone who wants to join. Then you have smaller breakaway groups, isolated from each other and from the main central area, engaging in more specific or more private conversation. There's no explicit rules for how any of this works, but for these more private parts of the room, the norms are different. Not anyone can just join in when they want, and the people who started the group aren't obliged to keep the conversation outsider friendly. Although ostensibly everyone in the room is socializing together, there is an implicit barrier that cordons off each breakaway group. If someone tries to enter one of these smaller groups without tacit permission, they're just going to be met with icy politeness until they take the hint and leave. If the main group tries to merge their conversation with one of the breakaways, it's up to that smaller group to choose whether to allow it and revert back to being part of the central public space, or reject it and keep themselves distinct from the rest of the room. These invisible walls are just like the physical walls in a house. They separate spaces based on their function, who's allowed in, and the rules that apply there. Just like how the rules are different for a bedroom, a bathroom, and a kitchen, so are the rules different for the invisible spaces within them. Looking at a normal house from above, you see this organic social structure in solid form. There's a large central public space with smaller private spaces coming off, all of which are connected to the public area, but none of which are directly connected to each other. In this sense, our physical architecture and our social architecture mutually shape each other. The physical space makes explicit the structure that was already put there through social norms, and then in turn shapes what kind of social interactions happen in that space. In a traditional tribal setting, it was the fire that served as the warm and communal central meeting point where anyone is free to come and go as they please. The fire radiates warmth and soft light in all directions, encouraging people to sit around it facing inwards. The fire is interesting enough to draw people to it, but not so interesting that it captures their attention. So facing towards one another, comfortable from the warmth but slightly bored from doing nothing, the architecture of the fire naturally nudges people to talk to each other and to connect. The fire, or at least the symbol of the fire, occupies its own space in the human psyche. It's the warm glow of socialization, of rituals, of togetherness, and of the tribe. In modern houses, the fireplace has evolved into the television. Unlike the fire, the TV is a lot more interesting to watch. A little too interesting. It captures people's attention and distracts them from each other. It only faces in one direction, forcing people to all look in the same direction as each other, rather than towards one another. The content on TV is unrelated to the group or what's going on in the room. As a result, there is no group experience or togetherness. There's just a series of individual experiences, one for each person watching. Unlike the fire, the TV is loud, suppressing conversation that might otherwise have arisen. The TV is cold, and the light it emits is cold too. The flickering glow is still there, but the warmth is gone. This isn't to say that modern homes have no communal hubs at all. Another candidate to consider might be the dining table. Here, like the fire, the food is interesting enough to give you something to look at, but not so interesting that it distracts from conversation. Like the fire, the dining table faces everyone inward, fostering socialization rather than isolation. And again, like the fire, the food is warm and inviting, spreading good vibes and by extension, promoting good conversation. But even here, our physical spaces get their revenge. Increasingly, families are putting TVs in their dining rooms, and open-plan design is undermining the barrier between lounge room and dining room. Some families are even leaving the dining table behind altogether, cheating on it with the TV instead. The dining room table cannot compete against the expertly engineered hyper-distractibility of TV. The vocabulary to describe these invisible social spaces is limited, and as a result, the changes that happen to them can be hard to talk about or to even notice in the first place. But for the everyday places where we spend most of our time, the design of this invisible architecture exerts an enormous influence on our social lives. What the television represents is much bigger than just a recent change. The human social condition has been transforming for a long time. By getting a better picture of where we've come from, we can start to take a glimpse into the future of where we're heading, and the risks and opportunities that are open to us in designing and defining the spaces we live in.
After the disappearance of European hunter-gatherers, the tribal structure didn't vanish overnight. The people shifted to farming as their main food source. They retained their large social circles from the pre-agricultural days. Large kinship-based clans built permanent settlements for themselves. This new environment was the beginning of something new, urban space. From the late Stone Age through to the Bronze Age, these settlements were built where clean water and flat, fertile land could be found. Towns were still small. The much larger Celtic hill forts that would serve as the prototypical Central European cities was still yet to come in the coming epoch, the Iron Age.
While the fireplace creates a true communal space where people are sharing in a group social interaction, the TV only creates a shared space. The space isn't private and there are multiple people in the room, but there's no group interaction or collectively shared experience. Each person is making use of the space in parallel to each other, but their experience isn't shaped by the people around them. We structure our homes by dividing them into physical rooms with different functions, and we do the same for our society as a whole. A city is like a house under a magnifying glass. The dining room is analogous to public restaurants, the TV is analogous to the cinema, and the lounge room is analogous to being in public. Are these communal spaces or just shared spaces? Another way of asking this is the invisible social architecture in these spaces built in such a way that it allows for communal group experiences, or does it isolate us into individualized microbubbles? When you go to a restaurant, are you going there to eat a meal with the other diners, or are you going there to eat a meal and the other diners are eating their meal in parallel? It would seem to be the second. You're eating your meal and they're eating theirs. People face away from each other on separate tables, and between each table is an invisible wall that you're not meant to cross. If you walked up to someone else's table, ordered a meal, and joined in with their conversation, that would be extremely weird. So what about the cinema? It seems like it's the same thing. The presence of other people in the same theatre as you is, if anything, a negative. You're not going there to watch a movie with the other patrons. You're specifically trying to put as much of a barrier between yourself and the other viewers as possible. You choose your seating specifically so as to avoid sitting next to them, and you enforce the social rules that tell people to shut up when the movie is playing. Each person gets to have an individualized experience. The goal is to make it as easy as possible to forget that there's anybody else in the room with you. And then what about being out in public? Is this a communal space or just a shared space? In cities, there's a kind of courteous dehumanization that takes place. People intentionally avoid eye contact and avoid standing or sitting too close to each other. They wear headphones and look down at the ground as a way of clearly saying, "For the love of God, do not talk to me. I don't exist and neither do you." Cities are filled with total strangers and randoms, and being insulated from them keeps you both more comfortable and safer. The invisible architecture of the city is designed to keep people as separate as possible, surrounding you on all sides with a protective wall of anonymity and non-interactivity. But these walls can get stifling. An illustration of this comes to us through the sublime awkwardness of being in an elevator. Here, the pretense of non-recognition becomes a farce. The conspicuous avoidance of eye contact and the visceral polite silence becomes just a little too jarring to keep pretending it's organic. How is it that in the vast interpersonal jungle of a city, it's elevators that have such a distinct social microclimate? The elevator is the only place small enough for the inherent unnaturalness of living among total strangers, and the deep evolutionary instincts against it to become too glaring to keep denying. It is not normal to live in a society of strangers. Nothing in our evolutionary history, thousands of years deep, did anything to prepare us for this kind of a situation. Our inbuilt social programming simply does not contain a category for someone who we're compelled by social norms to treat like a non-entity. Just in case any elevator engineers are watching right now, I do have a small suggestion I'd like to make. If our analysis of dining room table social dynamics is anything to go off, the real solution to this problem should be pretty obvious. Just put a TV in the elevator. This way I have something to look at, rather than those three-sided mirror interiors where no matter where I look, I'm basically always looking at myself. In all of this, it's important to note that the invisible walls aren't necessarily good or bad. Again, they're just like the walls of a house. The point of them is just to structure a space. What you do with that space depends on the situation and purpose. This also isn't to say that we should be trying to get rid of the shared, non-communal spaces that we already have. A large part of the attraction of cities is they allow you to wrap yourself in urban anonymity and just go around without the hassle and exposure that comes from a communal space, one where people would recognize you and would want to interact with you. The point is just to highlight that there really is a total absence of communal space in our culture. Like there really are none of these spaces anywhere. This is not natural or healthy. Prehistoric people were born into a dense network of mutually familiar tribe members with aligned interests and shared outcomes. People knew each other, and anything that was bad for the tribe was bad for each person within that tribe. The modern city is really none of this. Cities are way too large for people to know each other personally. The social fabric is stretched too thin. There are no broadly shared interests, and positive or negative social outcomes aren't shared by everyone in the city. If your neighbor's house burnt down with them trapped inside, it would likely make no major difference to your life one way or the other. Without a social fabric to bind people together, cities rely instead on a legal and economic fabric to coordinate people. The society of strangers isn't really a society at all. It's a useful economic structure, more like an insect hive, but it completely lacks the dense interpersonal network that constitutes a society. Cities as they are now can't create any truly social spaces. There can't be a communal hub when there's no community for it to be the hub of. In social settings where everyone knows each other, each person remembers the past behavior of everyone else. People's actions carry a lot more context and significance than they do in an anonymous society. For someone in a tribal setting, killing a mammoth doesn't just mean you get to eat meat for a while. It means you get to be that guy, feeding everyone in the tribe and getting flirted with by all the cavewoman babes. The stability of your social connections means you have a reputation, where the credit from killing the mammoth and feeding everyone will stick with you for life. This is a kind of trade. Someone with more resources than they can actually use for themselves trades those resources for social status with his group. But with the decline of these kinds of stable social networks, who is there to spend excess resources on but yourself? The sense of connection people have to others in their neighborhood is a pretty flimsy excuse for community compared to the deep and enduring bonds that people of the same tribe used to have between them. For prehistoric people, spending resources on others from your tribe is a celebration. You badly want to bring home a mammoth and parade it around the fire. In a society of strangers, spending resources on other people is just charity. It's a sacrifice. The tribe exerts pro-social peer pressure on its members, incentivizing people to prioritize status seeking and to climb the social ladder by providing a stable space in which being at the top of that social ladder actually matters. In a society of strangers, there is no such thing as a reputation. Nobody knows each other. There is no long-term stable social peer group that can exert pro-social pressure, and so people have nothing to gain from helping those around them.
Without anyone else to spend their money on, cashed-up dudes who hate their families have been forced to start innovating. Introducing the man cave.
As the evil mirror dimension shadow of the caveman, the man cave is his opposite in every way. While the caveman is pro-social and surrounded by those he loves, the man cave is an anti-social refuge from the rest of the tribe, in which all adversities are removed and replaced with distractions to occupy his self-imposed exile. While the caveman is burdened with the responsibility of protecting those who rely on him, but who is rewarded deeply for his efforts, the man cave is a regression into the infantile, into responsibility-free leisure, a pleasure both fleeting and shallow. And while the caveman returns home after a long day's hunt to see the beaming faces of his large and plentiful family greeting him, the man caver returns home to skulk off alone into his empty den. The only beaming face he needs is the face of his 72-inch OLED flat screen, beaming artificial light into his fat fucking face. The man cave is a temple to self-indulgence, materialism, and social isolation. Overflowing with excess resources, the modern mammoth hunter finds himself with too much meat. There is no one who he cares about enough to share the fruits of his labor with. The fruit begin to rot. Somewhere in his house is a room filled with beer fridges and arcade games. But has he forgotten already? He has no one to play them with.
As the first Iron Age cities in Western Europe began to grow, people found themselves in an alien social environment. In the Celtic proto-cities known as Oppida, populations reached up to over 10,000 people. Though residence was still clustered by family into distinct neighbourhoods, these towns were now big enough to include vast numbers of unknown strangers. Societies shifted to become more hostile, more formalised, more hierarchical. Contemporaneously, far larger metropoles with populations in the hundreds of thousands were under construction around the Aegean Sea in modern Greece and Turkey. These cities were intensely reliant on collective unity to protect against outside threats. Famines, plagues, and foreign invasions were not distant events only felt on the periphery of a vast nation. They reached everyone within the city walls. Citizens of the same city were not simply individuals living in the same place. They were fingers of the same hand. The tribal identity had been torn apart, but the inherent instinct underlying it had been successfully sublimated into a new civic identity.
Second chapter. The dose makes the poison makes the cure.
Some French philosopher once said,
Hell is other people.
Other people are complex and challenging, and they are usually the main sources of problems in our lives. And yet, mysteriously, we seem to do everything we can to be around them. As annoying as they are, virtually every experience in life would be so much lamer without the existence of other people. Just imagine a world in which everyone else has vanished and you wander the earth entirely alone. While you might be able to scavenge enough food and water to survive indefinitely, virtually all facets of life would be stripped of their luster and become palpably boring or pointless. Just the mere presence of other people creates a unique psychological space. A space that we spend so much time in that it's hard to imagine its absence, like asking a fish to imagine a world without water. But we know the effects that it has on people who are deprived of this psychological space. Solitary confinement is, on paper, an extremely safe environment to be in. all your physical needs are met, free food appears 3 times a day, and you spend your time in a climate-controlled room protected from all the other inmates. But despite it being far physically safer than a normal prison, and all your basic material needs being met, prisoners still need to be dragged kicking and screaming into the hole. With nothing and nobody to occupy the mind starts inventing its own entertainment. Paranoia and hallucinations are not uncommon. More generally, extreme isolation pushes people towards chronic anxiety or depression and destabilizes their mood, resulting in increased volatility and emotionality. Both the perception and the reality of social isolation, independently of one another, cause significant physiological damage downstream of their psychological effects, increasing mortality risk by at least 25%, leading American health authorities to declare social connection to be a significant public health issue. Social isolation and the chronic understimulation and stress it causes is as much of a poison as chain smoking or alcoholism. Primitive groups are diverse enough that it's hard to make too many generalizations about them collectively. There have been extremely aggressive and militarized tribes, like the Comanche Plains Indians, who relied heavily on raiding other tribes for food and wealth, and there have been extremely peaceful tribes, like the Pygmies of the Congo. There have been extremely hierarchical tribes, like the Chumash of California, with hereditary chiefs and social classes, and there are egalitarian tribes, like the Hadza of Tanzania, with no particular social hierarchy at all. But as far as generalizations go, it's a fairly consistent finding among anthropologists that when interacting with people living in tribal structures, those people tend to be surprisingly happy. Or more specifically, that despite the everyday dangers of their lifestyle, they remain extremely unstressed about it all. On its face, this might seem wrong, or maybe a case of idealizing the exotic savages. These are people who are surrounded all day and all night by animals that would eat them as a snack, living in huts made of leaves and mud, in an environment where if it doesn't rain for a while, you and everyone you know might simply die. And yet somehow they remain completely chill about it all. But maybe that isn't so surprising after all. The flip side of social isolation being a kind of psychological poison is that social connection works as one of the most effective medications that exists. The presence of other people is extremely stabilizing and psychologically nourishing. Just from your own experience, you probably already know this. Situations that are stressful or dangerous when faced alone can become trivial or even kind of fun with other people. And again, as we know from personal experience and validated by the science that surrounds it, the calming and health-promoting effects of other people doesn't just come from anybody. It's specific to people who you know well and who you're close to. In a normal day, it wouldn't be unusual to interact with maybe no more than 10 people or so all up, talking to a few of your co-workers, seeing your partner in the morning, and maybe catching up with a friend after work. The rest of the people you see, cashiers or passers-by on the street, are essentially complete strangers. And of those co-workers, it's likely many of them would be hardly much more than strangers either, at least not enough to qualify as a meaningful social connection. And with the wonders of remote work, DoorDash, and driverless Waymos, you can realistically get that number down to literally 0 face-to-face interactions per day. Our physical environment has never been so well suited to a life of luxury solitary confinement. And the change from tribal to modern socialization isn't just quantitative, there's a qualitative difference too. The level of closeness between people of the same tribe is not even comparable to that of most modern interpersonal relationships. When we're talking about those who are living the ancestral lifestyle, the other people they're spending their time with aren't on the same level of connectedness as co-workers, or really on the same level as friends. These are people they've spent their entire lives with, who they've often gone through brutal, maybe even traumatic bonding experiences. Painful or violent initiation rituals were and still are extremely prevalent. Certain African and Melanesian tribes use scarification as a way of marking people for certain social roles. Inuit groups force younger members to survive on their own in the Arctic for up to an entire year. Before they can become warriors, boys of the Amazonian Mawe tribe are forced to put their hand into a glove filled with bullet ants. The venom that bullet ants deliver, Panerotoxin, disrupts ion channels in nerve cells. Aside from being excruciatingly painful, this can cause hallucinations and multi-day long tremors. And even once this process is done, the ritual still isn't over. Over the subsequent few months, the boys will have to repeat this ritual a total of 20 times before they're allowed to call themselves warriors. So there's a trade-off. The cost of an extremely tight-knit and cohesive group is that the barriers to entry will have to be equally extreme. It requires members to undergo some kind of sacrifice or initiation that has to be genuinely difficult to get through. And even once you're in the group, it requires an intense willingness to conform to the standards of the group to keep your place. So is this worth it? Is the social status worth the price of extreme physical pain? Is the brotherhood and group unity worth the constant pressure to conform? The fact that people keep choosing to undergo these rituals seems to imply yes. The bullet end initiation of the Mawe is repeated 20 times. This means that for each of the boys who goes through with it, after having spent multiple days shaking from pain, as his body slowly filters out the neurotoxin that was injected into his hand, he still decides to get up and do it 19 more times, all for the right to call himself a warrior. But maybe we're different. Maybe our individualistic culture means that we're immune to these kinds of social pressures. Are we? Let's just think for a second here. When given the opportunity to endure a painful hazing ritual in exchange for membership within a tight-knit brotherhood of people very similar to yourself, is this a deal that people would take? In fact, maybe you can think of an example in modern life where this exact choice is offered to virtually everyone. If you guess correctly, and by correctly I mean you picked the same example I was thinking of, then congratulations. College fraternities are, in a very literal sense, a resurrection of the tribal social structure in the modern day. Young guys looking for the brotherhood and social prestige that comes from being in a tribe-like environment have reinvented the same social dynamics that have been baked into the human subconscious for a million years. These primordial instincts, which are suppressed in our unnatural environment, still resurface in new and adapted forms. When given the choice, people willingly submit themselves to some pretty extreme acts of physical punishment in exchange for the privilege to be part of a group that would require that kind of a sacrifice to get in. And the ritual of being tortured is itself what helps cement the bonds between the members in the first place, creating the solidarity that the group relies on for cohesion. If we put these two social structures side by side, tribes and frats, maybe the only meaningful difference between their respective initiation rituals is that frat hazing tends to be a little more on the humiliation side of things, whereas tribal initiations lean more painful and dangerous. But frats aren't the only instance of tribal social dynamics in modern life. A misconception in countries with significant gang-related crime is that gang members are doing it for the money. In reality, the overwhelming majority of gang members, mostly committing low-level street crime, make next to no money. A study of gangs in Chicago found that the average rank-and-file gang member was making around $3 an hour, below the federal minimum wage at the time. So why join? What does a young guy get from endangering his life each day so that he can get most of the money he makes taken off him by a gang leader who didn't do any work except wave a gun in his face? If you're risking your life to earn less than you would from working in fast food, what exactly is the point of it all? There is one obvious answer, which is that working in fast food is lame and being in a gang is cool. This might sound glib, but it's basically the answer most supported by social science for why people join gangs. People don't join gangs for the money, people join gangs because they're cool and dangerous, and they make you cool and dangerous by extension. So in both frats and gangs, you see the return of the repressed social instinct towards pack-like behavior as a kind of neo-tribe. And in both cases, the pretext for creating the group is secondary to the actual reason, which is motivated by the desire for social prestige and structure. Tribes typically use ethnicity and family lineage as their pretext for drawing membership lines. In the case of gangs, this role is served by crime, and in the case of frats, it can be something as simple as getting slizzard on the weekend. Both of these examples might make it seem like tribal instincts are unique to young men, but that is not the case. Women are generally massively overrepresented in communes and cults, making up about 70 to 80% of members on average for both. Both cults and communes offer people the opportunity to join a social space where members live in a community of personally connected, cooperative, like-minded peers and friends. Of all the tribal replacements so far, communes are the closest to recreating the kind of social environment that humans actually live in traditional societies. By contrast, cults and gangs represent the worst of the tribal instinct: the violent hierarchies, the overwhelming peer pressure, and the conformist groupthink. Fraternities and communes showcase the healthier possibilities possibilities that come from a tribal social circle. A deep sense of belonging and loyalty, a dense web of mutually beneficial relationships, and the ability to do things as a group that can't be done as just an individual. The tribal instinct still runs in our veins, still guiding our conscious and subconscious social preferences. As much as we pathologize tribalism and non-individualistic behavior, people keep on recreating the tribe in new forms, updating it for the new environment, but keeping the fundamental essence the same. Our standards for the quantity and quality of social interaction are likely to be set way too low for what is actually most natural for us. We often hear about how our Western diet is lacking in some essential nutrient or mineral, but what even is the RDI of socialization? I meant to ask that rhetorically, but as it turns out, people actually are giving out guidelines for this kind of thing. The most high-profile one I found comes from a social health expert who recommends the 5-3-1 rule, interacting with 5 people weekly, maintaining 3 close relationships, and spending 1 hour daily in face-to-face connection. If our evolutionary environment is anything to go off, this is badly underdosed. From our days of tribal socialization, where you're pretty much always surrounded by people who you've known your whole life, to this, interacting with 5 people in an entire week. 5 people. And the fact that it needs to be said at all points to the fact that many people likely aren't even meeting this bare minimum threshold. So, is social alienation a modern health crisis? It's debatable, and like with alcohol, how much of a poison you want to consume is up to you. But I can't help wondering about a tangential question. Is this framing as a health crisis actually useful? Like sure, maybe we would all be a little healthier if we lived in a more natural social environment. Maybe people are supposed to live in small bands of hunters and eat elk livers or goat's balls or whatever, but we all know that's not going to happen anytime soon. If the obesity crisis is anything to go off, it seems that we're all pretty good at finding glaring problems with our lifestyles, knowing exactly what we should be doing instead, and then doing absolutely nothing about it. So what do we normally do in these kinds of situations? It kind of seems like we usually just wait around until the problem gets so bad that someone finally engineers a solution for us. Ideally one that requires the barest minimum of effort on our parts. By the looks of it, obesity in America is finally getting its fat ass kicked, and it's not because of fresh vegetables and exercise. Maybe fixing our unnatural lifestyles is actually for losers, and everyone should just kick back until we engineer our way out of this one too. Surely those industrious eggheads can cook us up something for this one too, right? After all, if technology is what got us into this in the first place, can technology also be the thing to get us out?
Upon once a time, in a land not so far, to a quaint, sleepy hamlet came a self-driving car. The technology brothers had come down from the heavens to show to these yokels their latest inventions. The 3 brothers roused the townsfolk awake, gathered them to the square, and thusly they spake.
Hear ye peasants, hearken me. We are returned, the brothers 3, bringers of light and industry, and powerful new technologies.
The villagers murmured like they hadn't murmured in years. The crowd was abuzz with caution and fear. It had been many moons since the brothers last came, and the town had returned to its primitive ways.
You have regressed this much, I see. Your backwardsness, it sickens me.
The villagers seethed. The brothers believed that their sudden arrival would be better received. A woman stood forth in front of the rest and spoke to them loudly from deep in her chest.
The gifts you gave last time you came have brought on us nothing but pain. Last year you did award my son devices of immeasurable fun. An iPad, a PC, and a PS5. Now he watches anime, plays Halo, loves 4chan and Fortnite. Once outgoing and popular too, now he barely leaves his room. Addicted to the games he plays, I haven't seen his face in days.
The mothers of the whole town cried. Their own sons too won't go outside.
My daughter, pray, let's not forget her. She, alas, fares little better. You gave her that machine from hell. Dare I speak its name? An iPhone 12. You said, forsooth, it would connect her with her kin and distant friends. But nay, despite the words you said, it had the opposite effect. She sits transfixed before the screen, beholding others' social scenes. A phantom present but unseen decimates her self-esteem. Every night she lays awake, picking at her wretched face, scrutinized, remarked upon by the cyber world panopticon.
The village mothers had all seen their young girls turn to anxious teens.
And to my husband, did you beget a connection to the internet? I saw at first a change of heart, in bed no more could he stay hard. Till late one night I came upon him, and lo, I saw what he was watching. No more does he have eyes for me, for he prefers pornography. Husband, please control thyself. By day he goons, by night he jelks. He found on Tinder our next door neighbor, spoke words to her of carnal nature. In bed he longs for his virtual wench. His passion gone, the flame is quenched.
From the crowd arose a collective sigh. These women shared her marital life.
My town, my people, oh what I'd give to get back the place where I used to live. Our township was smaller, but still big enough. A spirit once lived here, the spirit of love. Upon once a time, this town was a home. Now the fire is cold, and we each sleep alone. So yes, we returned to our ways of old. You have brought us more problems than you have solved. Now be gone, brothers three, we don't need your magic. For the last time you've tattered our societal fabric.
The villagers together wept, for they all shared this same regret. The brothers now saw what the issue had been. Their previous visits had caused quite a scene. Emergency huddle to come up with a plan. It will need to be good in case shit hits the fan.
Listen here,
said the eldest.
I know you have qualms. We shall fix all your problems if you just remain calm. One by one you shall come for us to attend to the issues you've faced until you are content. First the son who had said he's addicted to games. Come along, young man, there's no need to feel shame. Your mother is wrong, things are not as she says. You are perfectly healthy, you just need a girlfriend. You won't leave your room, not a fuss, please remain. I have brought you a girl with a silicon brain. There comes a big day for all little boys. You grow up to be bigger and you need bigger toys. For you she provides anything you demand. You can do what you want, she is yours to command. Finest of maidens, no nagging, no whining. She hasn't got feelings, but she never stops smiling. Come on now, boy, take your damsel and go. Get out of the way, there's still others to go.
That is cheating, you write. The word go with itself, that's a poetry sin. You will soon burn in hell.
Must I too speak in perfect rhyme? These monologues take so much time.
Indeed you must in couplets speak. Your bumbling verse amuses me.
Very well, henceforth, myself I'll avail to continue to speak in this cumbersome way. Step forward, O daughter, unwell in the mind. I hear you have troubles of a telephonic kind. Your mother believes that your phone is to blame, but the demons inside you go by other names. Depression, anxiety, and OCD too. Bipolar, hysteria, I diagnose you. Forthwith I prescribe as the best approach 10 milligrams daily of Lexapro. Take a chill pill, I've got Xannies for that. Zoloft, Wellbutrin, perchance a Prozac. Your suffering is over with me as your shrink. By the time we are done, you won't feel a thing.
And what of the side effects these drugs can evoke?
If you don't stop yapping, I will increase your dose. I have cured you now. You can stop looking sad. I shall now back and forth the one you call Dad. Your wife has borne witness in salacious detail. Your licentious desires with thenceforth unveiled. But has she not considered that it's her that's to blame? For she is the one who's done naught but complain. And as she gets older, has she not gotten fat? She shouldn't be moody when her face looks like that. Oh, red-blooded male, insatiable lover. One wife is too few for your amorous hunger. Take not one wife, instead take three. We call it polyamory. And should your heart grow numb to love, just go and get another one. Now it really is time for us to be off.
He turned to his brothers, wink wink, cough cough.
But what do we owe you? You haven't said so. Do you take checks? Have you got Venmo?
The brothers all laughed as if something was funny.
It will cost you a lot, but it won't cost you money.
Though the brothers went off, flying into the clouds, the spectre of evil remained in the town. The crowd now dispersed, each gone back to their day, but the women of town weren't so easily swayed.
I shan't stand by as this community crumbles. I will not rest till those brothers are humble.
They went to the armory where they stored all the guns. The women all knew what had to be done. They had up their sleeve one final weapon, a HIMARS 3X547. As the brothers were flying through the clear summer sky, they all heard a noise that approached from behind. But before they could turn to look at the source, their bodies exploded with incredible force. Back at town, the women were in discussion.
What about all the legal repercussions?
But the mother knew best and their fears were assuaged.
He thinks that's a problem for some other day.
Final chapter. If you like it, then you should put a ring on it.
Wedding rings represent everything that technology doesn't. The ring itself doesn't do anything. It doesn't give you any new abilities or options that you didn't have before, and it comes with a long list of things that you can no longer do that you could do before. A marriage is the imposition of barriers, entirely voluntarily, in covenant with another person. But by two people mutually submitting to a set of prohibitions, they decide for themselves how they want to arrange the invisible social walls around them. By consciously and deliberately placing barriers around a relationship, the barriers within the relationship can be dissolved, unlocking new heights of intimacy and stability. And that stability in turn unlocks other options: having children, building a life and a family, and merging your souls into one collective whole. This extends to groups larger than just two people. When you intentionally put up social walls around a group of people, you can start disassembling some of the ones that exist between people. In a densely interconnected social network, like a family or a particularly tight-knit small town, you don't need to have locks on every door. Technology is excellent at the dissolution of natural barriers, and there are many places where that ability is needed. The technology brothers out there curing diseases and increasing food production are doing incredible work, but this approach misses something fundamental when applied to the social realm. Human connection isn't suffering from the social constraints that are placed on us. Those constraints are there on purpose, and they're what bind people together. Long-term and homogeneous communities, stable marriages, and lifelong friends are all valued more than their cheaper, more transitory alternatives. Making 1 million iPhones in a factory will give you a much better product than making one iPhone by hand. Does this extend to human relationships? It seems that, so far, technological solutions to social disconnection leave a lot to be desired. Porn is not as good as sex, and texting is not as good as talking in real life. Our social circles can be visualized as a series of concentric rings. In the outer ring is people who, if you saw them on the sidewalk while you're driving, you would honk at them to say hi. In the middle ring is people who, if you saw them on the sidewalk while you were driving, you'd pull over and talk to. And in the inner ring is people who, if you saw them on the sidewalk, you'd give them a lift. Outside these rings is everyone else on Earth, the endless sea of strangers who you don't and probably never will know personally. If you saw one of them on the sidewalk, you'd ask your passenger how many points you get for driving over them, and then you'd go back to what you were doing before and forget about them forever. As technology has progressed, these rings have been under intense pressure, shrinking them. A traditional hunter-gatherer would potentially have more than 100 people they would live with, travel with, and share food with. In modern, and especially Western cultures, it would be uncommon to have even 10 people all living under the same roof, preparing food together and pooling their resources. And more so than in their breadth, the depth of our networks have been massively downgraded. Translators of ancient Greek texts still struggle to convey to people in our modern individualistic culture the full depth of the collective spirit that unified people of the same city at the time. The modern idea of community doesn't even really come close to describing it. A slightly closer word might be family.
The city-based identities of the Iron Age fell apart a long time ago. At the beginning of the Machine Age, new thinkers began experimenting with modernized forms of collective identity. The nation was invented to unify large groups for organized political action. The technological processes that had been set off long ago and rapidly accelerated in the Machine Age have not stopped. Urbanization and globalization together work to pull people away from their isolated and self-contained communities and into an increasingly centralized single global social network. People's psychosocial integration within collective identities has been severed. This process has been both willingly embraced by some and forcefully imposed onto others. Individuals become free-floating, unbound by the constraints of group conformity, but untethered to the material benefits and social structure they provided. Individualism becomes the only self-conception that makes sense in this new environment. In the black sea of defamiliarized strangers, all that's left is the self. This process has brought incredible material wealth.
In their natural environment, cattle live complex lives. They roam, they graze, they breed, they protect. In the technological mindset, this is deeply inefficient. The only outputs that we want from cattle are meat and milk. The rest is just waste. So no longer does each cow play many roles. Each cow only plays one role now, and it's optimized for that role as much as possible. If the role of the cow is to be a milk factory, then it's kept indefinitely pregnant to extend the lactation period and bred to produce as much milk as possible. If the role of the steer is to be a meat factory, then it gets its balls cut off and it's kept in a state of constant anabolism to put as much meat as possible in their bodies. And if the role of a bull is to be used for breeding more cattle, they're one of the very few lucky ones. They're pampered relative to the others, kept in a state of low stress and fed a good diet. This process isn't cruel for the sake of it, as shown by how well breeding bulls are treated. It's just totally indifferent to that sort of thing. The only factors being measured are the quality and quantity of the three outputs. Everything else is essentially invisible. This is the technological mindset in its full form. If it was somehow possible to breed cows that had no legs or eyes or noses and were just tubes of meat with one hole for food to go into and another hole for waste to come out, we would likely already be farming bees in giant warehouses. The technological mindset defines its intended outcomes narrowly, and in the process of pursuing them, disassembles everything into its constituent parts, destroying the original in the process. The cow hasn't been killed, something much worse has happened. The cow has been disassembled, rearranged into its most efficient configuration. What happened to cattle is now starting to happen to people too. In a healthy social environment, each person plays multiple roles at once. A man can be a father, a husband, and a worker, all at the same time. The body that does labor is the same body that has sex with his wife. His body, his mind, his hands, his voice are all bundled together into a single coherent whole that we call a man. But like with the cow, there's still a lot of room for improvement. The human body is not very well suited to physical work. It's weak and it breaks easily. The human capacity for labor can be abstracted out, specialized, optimized, and mechanized. Steel is harder than bones, and hydraulics are stronger than muscles. The human capacity for thought can be abstracted out too. Silicon transistors are faster than sodium ion channels, and artificial intelligence is faster to manufacture than organic intelligence. Machines and computers replace the human body and mind. So what's left over? Do we become the breeding bull? Sitting around being fed by an intelligence far beyond our own and having non-stop sex? On the topic of sex in a technological world, the philosopher Slavoj Žižek has this to say.
My idea of a perfect date is the following one. We met, then she puts her plastic penis dildo into my plastic vagina, we plug them in, and the machines are doing it for us. They are buzzing in the background, and I'm free to do whatever I want, whatever I want, whatever I want, whatever I want.
In his imagination, with the machines taking care of the physical side of things, this leaves the two people free to find a more true intimacy between themselves. But even this is too optimistic. For this kind of an interaction to happen would require some willingness to engage in such a social act as meeting another person. But the technological mindset always pushes in the direction of individualized experiences, of deconstructing a whole into its constituent parts and optimizing each part separately. Each person's sexual experience has to be completely separate from the others so that their fantasies can be indulged to their fullest extent.
When human pleasure is narrowly defined as the sole metric to be maximized, this positions other people as being, at best, a means to the end of self-gratification, and at worst, an obstacle. Like what happened to the community, the individual as a coherent unit is broken down and sold off for parts. The same processes that turn objects into people turn people into objects. In the solipsistic pod-world hypertainment superplex, the human being doesn't become the breeding bull, it becomes the meat tube. In its earliest days, the internet seemed like an almost utopian technology. It promised to connect you personally to the world, to your friends, to your relatives, and to interesting strangers. For a time, the early internet was able to live up to these promises. Before 1993, the internet was mostly restricted to first world university students, which was a small and cohesive enough cohort that, for a long time, there existed a sort of online global village. Once ISPs began offering user internet access to a broader market, the barrier to entry into internet spaces eroded, and the cultures of existing forums were swamped by new people in an event referred to as the Eternal September. Since this moment, and increasing exponentially ever since, the utopian promise of the World Wide Web is looking increasingly hollow. MySpace is dead and Omegle got banned. Facebook has evolved from an interesting and unique public square filled with all your favorite people to Slop Central, a fully automated, algorithmically tuned attention factory. The symptoms of psychosocial decay begin first appearing in the cognitively compromised, the elderly, and the young. As they become untethered from other people, they become untethered from reality itself. Their epistemological foundations melt into something much more antisocial and deranged than before. Rest in peace, boomers. Patient zero of psychosocial decay. The machine wins. We're all meat tubes now.
Final chapter 2, the Encore. Now what?
It can be hard to define exactly what social capital is, since it can take so many forms. But however you define it, one thing stays the same. Having none of it sucks, and having a lot of it is awesome. Gated communities, golf clubs, and prestigious universities are all ways of buying into an elite and homogeneous network. The slow decay of our social fabric means that something as simple as living among people like yourself is becoming more and more of a luxury. And even when they're packaged as a luxury product, these networks still aren't that great. Gated communities are a little nicer than normal neighborhoods, and golf clubs can be kind of fun, but they're still not really a proper substitute for the profoundly communal way of life that people are evolved for. No matter how rich you get, this is one thing you fundamentally cannot do just on your own. It takes a village to build new social architecture from scratch. There's a kind of insane mismatch between our physical architecture, where we build the biggest and most luxurious houses and cities we've ever lived in, and our social architecture, which by comparison looks like complete shit. With the crazy levels of material wealth in modern life, you'd think this could have been leveraged into building the kind of social spaces people actually want to live in. So far, this hasn't happened. The hub and spokes model of private versus communal space that people naturally tend to prefer has, if anything, been going away. Our cities are being designed as all spokes, no hub. This might seem like just a fact of modern urban life, but it's really not. Up until recently, and in some places still around today, there were genuinely communal spaces in cities, places where the internal social walls were a lot more relaxed. Take the restaurant example from earlier. There are a few key things that, if changed, would massively alter the vibe of the place. Having people sit on a few big tables rather than lots of little ones, easing up on some of the social norms that prevent people from approaching others, getting everyone super hammered so they loosen up a little. This has been done before. What I just described is basically a pub. Not all that different in principle from a restaurant, but with a lot more of an effort made to create the kind of communal vibe you'd expect if you were just visiting a friend's house. And that's not a coincidence. Pub is just short for public house. Originally, these were just someone's home that they would open up to the public for drinks and accommodation, kind of like an OG Airbnb. Over time though, even pubs are getting more formal. More like just generic restaurants than that unique living room style atmosphere. Still though, they prove an important point. The sharp distinction that we draw between communal domestic spaces and impersonal public spaces is not an inevitable fact of life. You can design spaces that have the comfortable social atmosphere of a home and then expand them out to a way larger scale. So far, the relationship between material wealth and technological advancement on one side and the strength of our social networks on the other has been looking mostly adversarial. As we get richer, we get more atomized. For every 2 steps forward that we make to our quality of life, we take 1 step backwards socially, meaning we live in a world 2 times lamer than it actually has to be. But is this a fact of how things actually have to be, or more just a description of how things have been so far? Is it possible to have all the social, material, and financial upsides that come from living in a large group without having to revert to some kind of pre-industrial lifestyle? Can we have the communal social lives of the Amish while still getting to keep the internet and Red Bull and monster trucks? In other words, is the trade-off between social capital and economic capital one that you actually have to make? Or can we build communities in the 21st century that combine the best of both? New social architecture, communal towns and cities, built to take full advantage of the modern world, grabbing technology by the nuts and using it to carve out new social real estate. So far, this has all been pretty broad, more of a bird's eye survey of the state of our invisible architecture than an actual on-the-ground inspection. So how do you actually translate these broad concepts into the real world? In the next episode, we'll take a look at some of the successes and failures of social design, the utopian social experiments, the fanatical cults, and the stories that are still unfolding, as your host returns, as always, with yet another Club Classic.
Now I'm left